Okay, and it looks like we are live. How's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Thank you guys all so much for chiming in for the latest podcast episode here of Queen's Corner, our new official name. That is me, WardyNYM. That is Anthony Recker. We are without our other beloved co-host in Joe Sorrell, but Joe should be back with us next episode, hopefully after the Red Series. But we have a lot to get into, and it's been a lot of doom and gloom in Mets fandom right now. There have been pretty much no positives the past 2 weeks. As a Mets YouTuber that has the luxury of covering this team daily, it has not been fun as of late. So I'm going to share a lot of raw reactions and opinions to how this team has performing and what has been a terrible slide for pretty much the majority of the season thus far. So we're going to pick Rex brain a little bit too to see how he feels, especially from the player's perspective, on being with teams in which they've been through bad stretches such as this, and a lot more. Some key updates on Max Scherzer with a lingering injury. Is it smart or is it wrong for him to be pitching with said injury right now? Potentially some key updates on Ronnie Mauricio and the kids, and a lot more as the Mets are trying to get out of their funk. And this is also our first podcast episode, not only on the WardyNYM YouTube channel, but if you're watching live on Twitter, either on my WardyNYM Twitter, Darren at the Seven Lines Twitter, or of course on the Seven Lines Facebook. We appreciate you having us on. Of course, this is a great partnership we're doing with the Seven Line. We're really excited to get into it. And before we get into what is going to be a lot of doom and gloom in this, Rec, we haven't really heard your opinions aside from, typing a tweet. So I want to know, what is your reaction to us now partnering with Darren in the Seven Line? Because I'm stoked for it.
Couldn't be more excited. I mean, Seven Line's been a big part of this organization, but I think what's fun for me is, I wasn't there for the ground floor of it, but I was certainly there when it felt like it became what it is now. I mean, that 2015 season, they were on the road with us, and they engulfed stadiums. I mean, it felt like home games. It was incredible, and to have their support when I was playing was awesome. I've kept in touch with Darren a little bit here and there since, and it's just really good to be able to be a part of something that represents the Mets in such a positive way. The way they get out there, interact with the fans, and they are the fans. I mean, this is a fan-led, fan-driven, unbelievable experience, and it's really cool to be a part of it, and just looking forward to what we can create together.
Yeah, no, I think you said it beautifully. Hopefully we're going to have some time this year where we're all together, taking part in either some Seven Line events, doing some live shows. I know that Darren in his beautiful Seven Line truck even has Wi-Fi in that bad boy. So that'd be really cool if we do stuff out of the parking lot. So a lot of fun things are in store for this Mets team. Now, it's covering them this year. However, what we need to talk about is what has not been fun. And Rec, you got to talk me off a cliff. I'm going to go through some numbers. Let's talk about these past 2 weeks. Not even just this Rocky series, because we haven't done an episode since previewing that Braves matchup. Feels like a year ago already. And the Mets, over their past 2 weeks of baseball, 14 games to be exact, they've went 3-11 during that span. They have been outscored, Anthony, 78-46. Pitching wise, there is no identity. There's no consistency with this team right now. You're having Max Scherzer return that we're going to get onto in a singular segment on him, still not fully healthy. Is that a good or a bad thing with him pitching? Justin Verlander makes his long-awaited return there in Detroit, and the Mets get no run production for him. Color me surprised.
Yep.
The Mets have an ace on the bump, and they can't perform any offense for them. I feel like we've seen that before in recent years, right? And now this Rockies series, Kodai Senga had a strong start that we saw in Game 1, 6 innings, no earned runs, 4 walks, but all in the first couple innings, so he settled down nicely. Little to no offense. Game 2, no offense. In Game 3, when you got offense, you didn't have any pitching. We're throwing out pitchers out there on a night-to-night basis now that pretty much weren't supposed to start the year with the Mets, but are currently in key roles for this team due to injury. And even the guys that are supposed to be stepping up aren't doing that. So it's been this beautiful mixture of a lack of consistency on the offensive front like no tomorrow, a lack of consistency on the pitching front. So, Rec, I just got to ask you, how bad is it for this Mets team right now? Because they are driving me absolutely crazy.
Look, it's not good. One of the things when you're going through this as a player, and you kind of touched on it off the top, I've been a part of some winning teams. I've been a part of some losing teams. I've been a part of clubhouses where even in 2015, I mean, we went on a great run at the end of the year, right? But there was a time and actually early in the year, I forget what we started the year, like 11-1, 13-1. I don't remember. It was crazy. We went on a really good run to start the year. Maybe it was 13-2. I don't even know. We started the year great, and we got into a funk. Like, we got into a pretty bad offensive funk where at least we kind of understood what the problem was and how to address it. The problem I see with this team right now is that every night it's something else, whether it's the bullpen, whether it's the starting rotation, whether it's the offense, doesn't show up that night. And it's not for lack of trying. It's literally looking around in that clubhouse and going, man, like, how do we put this together? How do we get everybody on the same page and put a 9-inning game together that we feel good about as step one, and then try to repeat that tomorrow? It's such a difficult place to be as a player, because you're looking around at the guys in the clubhouse, you're going out there on the field, you're pumping yourself up, you're getting yourself ready to go, and then something fails along the way, whether it's yourself or it's somebody else. It happens, and you feel lost, like you feel helpless, like, okay, how do I get us out of this? And then you get the guys who start trying too hard. This is where Pete in the past has always had trouble. When everything comes crashing in, Pete tries to shoulder everything and take it on his own and go and be 10 times better. And you end up failing when you do that, because that's not what baseball's meant to be. And so it's a really tough predicament, really tough situation to be in. And I just hope this team, is in a place where they didn't have a lot of this last year until the very end of the year in the playoffs, right? Like, this team was riding high all year long. New York baseball was riding high. The Yankees were playing great. The Mets were playing great. New York was just up in arms about how great their baseball was. This year couldn't be more opposite to start the season for both of these teams, and the Mets included. And it's really been a tough one. When you're inside that clubhouse, you just, like I said, it's just trying to find some consistency. You find yourself, and you hear, you hear this in other sports too, but in baseball a lot, like the process. Go about your routine, do your daily routine, just stick with it, and eventually things will work itself out. It's easy to say that, and it's easy to believe it at times, but when the results keep not coming against teams like the Rockies, you start to feel like, okay, do we need to press? Like, what do we need to do? I don't understand this. How do we get out of this hole right now? It's really not easy. And there's no one simple answer. And with this team, there is no one simple answer, because there's a lot of facets of this team that are just not performing to the level that they want to be and that they know they can perform at.
Yeah, I think from the fan perspective especially, you hit the nail on the head, how there's a collective issue right now. It's not like it's just one singular thing. It's like, okay, we know how to properly address that. Say the bullpen is in shambles. You either bring some guys up, or maybe you need to do some external moves, some waiver wire stuff, whatever you need to do. No, everything and truly anything is going wrong for this Mets team, including bad bounces too. I mean, if we've watched in previous games, normally this Mets team rode, as Spencer Strider would love to say, they were a lucky team. But let's not get it twisted. The Mets did have some luck last year, but it went in hand with how they always put the ball in play. Right now, they're not even doing that on a consistent basis. They're not getting the right bounces. If anything, it's going against them. And the frustration is just constantly building with this club. I mean, it was one thing to go all the way to Detroit for just that rather awkward road stand, thanks to the new schedule, unfortunately. They get swept there. It was terrible. The weather hadn't been good at home against Atlanta when those games got pushed. But again, it was justified. I wasn't shocked that the Mets lost 2 out of 3, given the circumstances, right, and how they were performing. But Detroit, I mean, there's no excuses. You're deflated after Ottavino, we saw, give up those runs in the 8th to Detroit, thanks to Haas, who was just like Sean Murphy in that Braves series. 2 catchers back-to-back just killing against the Mets. I'm sure you appreciate the catcher hitting aspect, but not so much against the Mets aspect.
Not so much against the Mets, but
yes,
absolutely.
The Mets. Exactly. But JV comes back, they have no life there whatsoever, and then you come home and it's the Rockies team. It's like this Mets team is playing so inconsistent, so poor that if you need a pick me up, just play the Mets. I mean, that's what the Detroit Tigers did. That's what the Rockies did. By God, the Reds are bad. I'm scared. I'm genuinely not looking forward to this series that starts tomorrow with the route that they've been on. And normally you should, when you have Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Kodai Senga as your big head trio to pitch in this series, but I don't know what Mets I'm going to get, right? And to the point of the offense, as inconsistent as it's been, there are still things to take away. There are positives. I was happy to see the Mets. They put 6 runs on the board yesterday. Doesn't help when you give up 13 to the Rockies, right? 8 earned from both Jimmy Yacobonis and Tommy Hunter combined. Joey Fuego having to pitch on short rest just to fill in for this rotation. Again, wasn't terrible, wasn't great, but there's these constant issues that we've seen time and time again. And there's one thing that I've noticed since the start of the year, Rec, and correct me if I'm wrong, this team doesn't have any it factor whatsoever. It's very different than last year. This Mets team in 2022, when they started, and don't get me wrong, I understand that a hot start only means so much because the Mets fell flat on their face down the stretch when it mattered most. But they were hot, and they had ways to win. You couldn't count them out, even if they were, say, down by 4 or 5 runs in a ball game a lot of times. Now, you're really not feeling confident about this Mets team on a night-to-night basis on getting out of jams should they face early deficits, either because the offense isn't going to be there or the relievers aren't going to be able to back them up because they're gassed like crazy, eating innings for these starters that on average can't go past 4.5 innings. Like that.
I believe the Mets have starting rotation as the second least amount of innings in all of baseball.
You're correct. Yeah, it's been that bad.
That's not a good stat. That is not where you want to be, especially when before the year even started, you lost your best reliever, maybe the best reliever in baseball, in Edwin Diaz. That is not where you want to be at all.
And speaking of
this team was built around the starting rotation. They expected that to carry them far more than the bullpen, even with Edwin Diaz in the fold. And the fact that they have done the opposite has really been the opposite of a table setter. I mean, it's been what's really kind of led to some of their problems. We knew this team was going to have issues scoring runs in bunches at least, right? Like last year they scored runs, but they didn't hit the home run ball. They weren't, that explosive offense that you kind of wanted them to be. That said, the pitching was phenomenal. We knew they were going to go out there, they were going to strike people out, and they were going to get outs, and they weren't going to put, the offense wasn't going to have to put up a lot of runs in order to win baseball games. This year, it's been the complete opposite, and the offense, feels some of that pressure. I'm sure it's not fun, but they just got to find their way out of it. Both sides of the coin.
Yeah, 100%. And look, naturally, you're going to have the more optimistic fans, including myself. I mean, Rec, you've known me a while. I'm usually a huge optimist when it comes to covering this team, especially early in the year. We know how many games that this team still has left. However, there's something to be said about the type of downward spiral that they have currently been on, especially against lesser opponents. You look at this 3-11 stretch, and it's like, oh, maybe they had a tough schedule. No. I mean, aside from losing 2 games to the Braves here, and that 3-game set originally was supposed to be 4-game, but got pushed to August for a doubleheader then, the Mets have lost games to either losing series or games to the San Francisco Giants, the Washington Nationals, the Colorado Rockies. I mean, this is inexcusable, truly. This early in the year, when especially on the division front, these games mean more than what they have in years past because you only have so many divisional games that you have now with the expanded schedule where you face every team. So to start a year could not have, yes, the Mets are only 1 game below 500. The sky is not falling. We're aware of that. But to see the differences from the start of last year, this year, they're truly bipolar. They're completely opposite. And there's one thing that can be said, and maybe this early adversity is good for this Mets team, but I would make the argument that maybe, just maybe, we're even in a worse spot right now because of what the issues that this team currently has that need to be fixed. We don't know if they're going to be fixed. You highlighted the rotation. Let's talk about that for a minute before we get in Max on his own. Heading into the year, you had, I think we all had a fair amount of excitement, optimism, maybe some cautious optimism. You lose a lot of the pieces in the rotation from last year. You fill it, but what you fill it were either more high risk, high reward guys. Even with Kodai Senga, for example, who I love, and I'm not sliding in the bit right now, right? But Jose Quintana is not going to be pitching anytime soon still, even though he started throwing. It's going to be a while for him. Max Scherzer, 38 years of age, has yet to stay healthy. Justin Verlander starts his Mets tenure by missing the first month due to injury, a guy that has been a workhorse in his career and did not miss much of last year until down the stretch, coincidentally enough, when the Mets were having their struggles too. So you see this rotation. We knew that the concerns were there, and already they're being exposed for a team that is supposed to be reliant on said rotation. That is not a good recipe. Yeah. So I got to ask you, Rec, before we talk more on Max in particular and about this team, how much did you maybe expect this heading into the first month or 2 of the year versus what are you surprised with what you've seen?
I didn't expect this level of performance. I thought they'd be better. They showed such consistency last year for 130 games, probably 140 even, maybe, before the end of the year. Kind of, I'm not going to say they fell apart. They just had a bad, few weeks and then a bad playoff, and it looks really bad and it's terrible and it stinks that it happened at that time of year. But they were so consistent for so long. I think that's what surprises me about what I'm seeing right now is the fact that we've seen the exact opposite this year. The offense, they're not putting up runs. Early in the year, they were stealing bases. Now they're not stealing at all. They've got like 5 in the last 2 weeks. I think they were second. I think they were leading baseball.
Yes.
They were like leading baseball 2 weeks in. Now they've got 5 in the last 2 weeks. The bullpen, you get like a really good outing from Ottavino, and then I get these shaky ones. He hasn't like blown up. He hasn't been terrible. Don't get me wrong. Robertson's still been very good. But guys that you kind of needed to step up in Diaz's absence, the Drew Smiths of the world. You could even talk about some of the guys like John Curtis and those that have had to fill in at times. It just has not been good. I think they were hoping they would have a full 5-man rotation coming out of camp in Verlander, Scherzer, Senga, Carrasco, and Quintana. And I'm going way back.
Yeah.
So they were hoping that guys like McGill and Peterson would be more of those, 6-7 starters / bullpen options, AAA depth, well, that went out the window real fast. Verlander just coming back now. Quintana, we're still not going to see for a little bit. Carrasco, we're still not going to see for a little bit. Scherzer's going to, got some issues, but every team has injury issues. So to me, like, yes, it's an excuse, but it's not. You have to have, as an organization, a way to combat this. And unfortunately, the guys that they were relying on or hoping they'd be able to rely on, McGill, Peterson, even Buto as like an 8th guy, they've been like okay at times, but then at other times just terrible. And it's really set this team behind in ways because now you're having to make up a lot of innings with your bullpen. That wasn't a strength once Diaz went down anyway. So it's just kind of been this snowball that's just been rolling, and it's really starting to get worrisome. I think, for fans, it's worrisome because this is a team you expected to be competing for first place in this division for sure. And now you're seeing a Braves team that started slow last year that's all of a sudden hot, and they have a healthy Ronald Acuna, and they've got a Spencer Strider who looks like he's taken a next step. And it's kind of scary. You were hoping that you were going to be that team that was going to be competing at that point. So it's tough. It's a tough spot, I think, for the fans. It's just a matter of, can this team like come together and start to put some consistency out there on the field? We haven't seen it yet. Not the way that you need to over 162. And so that's really what it comes down to. And can they find maybe a spark? Maybe they can find a spark in some of this youth. Beatty has been good, been really good. Alvarez has started to play, hit a lot better over the last 10, 11 games. I think he's hitting almost like 300.
Yeah, exactly. He's been doing really well. Yep.
So it's really, it's not those guys, like, right. So early on, Pete and Lindor were carrying the team. And this was a problem last year. It was a problem the year before. And this is a problem I've mentioned several times. They don't have those guys around them that can help carry the team. Those guys can't just do it by themselves because they can't hit a homer from all 9 spots in the roster and the starting lineup. So they just need a little bit more. They need that spark. Beatty and Alvarez are doing it. We'll see what happens if there are some more young guys ready to come up. I know Vientos is raking in AAA. I know Ronnie got off to a great start. I think he slowed down a little bit, but still hitting the ball all over the place. They've got some options. What are they going to go to? How are they going to spark this team? But really, the pitching has to get better too. So it's tough.
Yeah, that pitching is truly my biggest concern. As much as I have concerns about the consistency of the offense, Brett Beatty has continued to show signs of life every single time he's out there. He's been moved up. We saw even yesterday in the Mets loss, he's moved up to the 5 spot for the first time in his career. And what did he do? He ripped a 2-run single to right, his first opportunity there. Alvarez with a towering double, which then became a run scored thanks to Luis Gourmet, who's been non-existent with the bat up until yesterday, we saw with that RBI single. So you're getting production from the kids, which is great to see. They shouldn't be guys you're relying on. We're already having discussions on who's the next man up, because we just are not getting
Yep.
that consistent production. It's like when you need your contact guys to be going, they're not going, and we're just getting singular power, or the other way around. Nothing is in unison. And another thing that, again, has continued to be an issue is the lack of consistency with Max Scherzer. Now, let's talk about Max, because as we saw from his last start, which was in Detroit, coming off of that suspension, fastball was flat. I mean, Max looked terrible. Let me face it. He had no command of the strike zone whatsoever. I understand he's probably done a little side sessions on the side, but really hasn't thrown too much since his last start, and in total hasn't thrown more than 3 innings in like a 3-week plus span, coming off of that injury where he missed at least one start heading to LA. So this has been a slow roll for him. The fastball sitting 91, 92. He's getting barreled like crazy pretty much his entire start out there, which he did not look sharp at all. And he said post-game in that start, losing to Detroit, that, he's still getting back from his injury. And then we find out through New York Post today, as we knew, but it was more headline today, how Max is still dealing with a lingering ailment. This is the same one they have been dealing with his right scapula, if I'm not mistaken. So he's constantly dealing with that issue that he's playing through. And I want to know what your thoughts are on his comments, because I'm honestly not encouraged. As someone who's been a very big Mad Max fan, we're seeing a 38-year-old once again injured for a second consecutive year with the Mets, and it might get worse before it gets better on his front. Now, he said, according to himself, his last start, he was healthy. He just wasn't locating, and he said that his fastball was a little bit down because he was really trying to make sure that he wasn't pushing things too far. And he also went on to say that he rather play 80% versus then go back on the IL and then be 100% eventually. He's trying to grind things out the best he can to do everything to not be on the IL stint once again. While I can appreciate that bulldog mentality to want to be out there every 5th day, knowing that this rotation as is quite literally in shambles with the depth it has right now, with guys getting work, guys not going deep enough. But there's also something to be said about him and his ego, and I've emphasized this a lot. I love Max, but him going out even at 80% might not be in the best interest of himself or the Mets right now, as it's still the beginning of May. So I got to ask you, what is your thoughts on this? Because he's going out there, we're going to see, he's scheduled to pitch tomorrow, I believe, in that first game against the Reds. So that could really be a telltale sign of what he's looking like. He's getting back from his injury, but unlike what we initially thought, he's not fully healthy. Even with the suspension rest, still not fully healthy, and he probably isn't going to be fully healthy unless he has potentially an extended IL stint, similar to his oblique last year. So, Rec, how are you feeling about this? Because for me, I am not encouraged, and I think there's potential more damage to be done should he continue to pitch while injured at his age.
I'm gonna start with Max coming over, before last year.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought that was a little bit interesting. I've said it on here, I've said it on other shows. I would have rather have had 2 pitchers than Max, because you could have gotten 2 very good pitchers for the amount of money that you're paying Max per year. If you rolled in, I think at the time it was like Gausman and Rodon. I know Rodon's hurt this year and it hasn't been good, but if you rolled those 2 together, it was pretty close, like on a by year basis, like how much they were getting paid. I was like, I'd rather have 2 guys so that if at least one breaks down, I have the other one, right? And Max had shown a couple signs that, that in 21 with the Dodgers, where he kind of broke down towards the end, it wasn't as good. He looked hittable at times, had the back issue in the playoffs, had to get pushed back a day because of the tired arm or whatever. To me, it was not the best signing. And I thought the same thing this offseason with JV. Why sign a guy for that much when you could split it up and make your team a lot better in different places? That said, this is still Max Scherzer and it's still Justin Verlander. They're still fantastic pitchers when they're right, when they're healthy, maybe when they were younger. Scherzer right now, I think, is he's being more public about what's going on, injuries, not feeling 100%. Maybe that's his way of trying to rally this team. Maybe that's his way of saying, you know what? We're not playing our best. We really don't have any other options. We just started Lucchesi on 3 days rest in the rotation because we didn't have somebody else to pitch that day. Like roster wise, we didn't want to call someone up and have to let someone go. And so we had to put a guy out there on 3 days rest. That's not ideal. And I think this might be Max kind of raising his hand and saying, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go out there and give you everything I got. I hope I don't get hurt, but I'm gonna be a bulldog And hopefully the rest of the team sees that and follows it. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you love in the clubhouse. When you see that kind of stuff, it's like, oh yeah, okay, all right, this guy's, he cares. He's going out there. He's giving it all. He might break down tomorrow. He might be done. He might end his career out there on the mound trying to pitch for us. It almost reminds me a little bit of Harvey in 15. Like, that stretch run he had through the playoffs was incredible. And I think everybody on that 15 team looks back and says, like, thank you, Matt. Thank you. Because you gave everything you had to that team. And maybe that negatively affected, your physical performance for the rest of your career. Mentally, there was some things there. I wish you would have had some things a little bit tighter up there. But physically, like, he gave it all. And I think that's what Max is trying to do right now. He's trying to be that guy, that bulldog, to get everybody going. And I think that's, in itself, that's why you brought Max over. That's why you signed him. That's why you gave him $43 million, to be that guy. And so if he feels he can try to do it and maybe not get hurt, I got to say, go do it. Maybe that's how this team, maybe that's what kicks this team in the butt. Hopefully nothing bad happens. But if I'm in that clubhouse, I appreciate that, the hell out of that. That is what gets you the respect that Max Scherzer has in the game all around the league. Guys playing against him, guys playing with him, it doesn't matter. They love the guy because the way he goes out there and competes. And that's what you got to have. And again, I appreciate the health and him and me wanting him to stay healthy for this team, or if I was on it for my team. But at the same time, like, giving this team that kick might be exactly what they need.
You brought up a really interesting point from the player perspective, because, from my point of view, I saw it both ways. Like, part of me was like, okay, Max is trying to grind this out, as I appreciate to make sure that he can eat innings while he can right now, for the team still getting ramped up. JV's just coming back off of the IL, so it's a slow roll for him too. Appreciate that. And then I'm also looking at the point of view that I've always felt this way with Max. Love him, but after we learned with the oblique last year, his ego just feels like it gets in the way of potentially what could be more important long-term this year. And that's where I find myself having a confliction on. However, I do like how you mentioned this. If this is kind of, a hurrah for the locker room, if you will, saying, yeah, like, I'm not 100% right now, but I'm still going to go out there and do what I need to do. And hopefully that lights a little bit of a fire under your ass to kind of start to get things consistent and get things going. And for that, I appreciate Max, and I'm with you on that front. I personally am just teetering on which one I kind of like more, with the potential risk of him having not only a lingering injury all year, but God forbid if something gets worse. Because as things stand right now, there's no guarantees on how the trade deadline would go. I feel very confident saying the Mets are going to add a starting pitcher by the trade deadline. If they don't, I will be beyond bothered, because even with everyone healthy, you just don't love those odds, right? You don't know how deep guys are going to go. I know we're early in the year, but we're already having Joey Lucchesi pitch 3-4 times turns in the rotation when he was the Mets number 10, number 11 starter heading into the season.
Yeah.
I mean, no slight on Joey Fuego, but that's a concern. That should not be the case. That should not have ever been considered. And that's where we're already at in May. And this is the constant issue that we face as Mets fans, and anyone that follows this Mets team, this consistency with the injury bug. It's year after year, and a lot of it we see from a mile away, and still yet it comes, whether it's because of guys' age, whether it's because of injury history, things of that nature. It's constantly happening. And for this Mets team now on the pitching front, not only the rotation, but the bullpen, we're hopefully going to be getting reinforcements soon, like Brooks Raley and some others. But my God, I mean, the Mets don't have any guy that can come out there consistently and eat innings when a starter is not going deep. The Mets desperately need a Trevor Williams type right now, and they have none. They have no guys out there that you can feel comfortable about in the middle innings, eat 2-3 innings consistently. Yacobonis did one day, great. Then the next, he got absolutely shelled like yesterday. Again, it's like you just need guys that are more prominent with the names, because they actually have, better pedigree in their MLB careers than what we're seeing right now. It's no slight on any of them. But this is a major concern for this team. And to hear this about Max, which I already knew about the injury, but kind of headlined further, does rub me the wrong way, because I'm thinking down the line. And shame on me for getting ahead of myself. But like most of us fans, we have aspirations of hopefully having something good happen this year down the stretch. And one more thing. Maybe adversity earlier in the year isn't a good thing. We saw it with the Phillies last year. Look what happened. A much worse scenario, too. We saw it with the Braves 2 years ago. Look what happened to the trade on the line and beyond. 2019 Nationals. List goes on and on. Maybe this is all part of the plan for this to benefit the Mets in the end, but it's certainly not looking pretty right now. So I appreciate those remarks on Max. And I got to ask you, as a whole, with how this team is performing and everything they're going through, what is your level of concern? If you had to rate it between 1 to 10, where would you place your number right now?
Just because it's still early May, I'm going to put it at like probably a 4.
Okay.
4 out of 10. It's really early. Things can turn around. What I'm seeing and the fact that there isn't an identity on either side of the ball right now, that's tough, and that is concerning. That said, there's enough talent in that clubhouse that they should be able to right the ship, and that and they have enough experience. They have enough leaders. They have enough guys who have been here and done it. You just got to find the right spark. They got to find it. In 15, it wasn't until until the trade deadline, we made some moves and boom, we had an offense. Like Cespedes was that dude. We had guys coming off the bench and Johnson and Uribe. We had Clippard out of the bullpen with the guys that we already had. We had a great rotation, like stuff clicked. I don't think this team can wait until the trade deadline. Not at the pace they're going at right now. They're going to have to figure something out sooner than that.
And that's what the assumption that they're even going to be affected by the trade deadline, because we know what happened last year. They sat on their hands.
This is different. Last year it was all roses, right? Like straight into the deadline. It was like this team just keeps winning. Did they lose a series before the trade deadline last year? I don't think they did.
Yeah, if it wasn't often if they did.
I don't think they lost a series.
Wow.
Until after the trade deadline. So it's just such a different scenario that, not to say that this front office is going to panic, but they're going to know, okay, we have holes. There's injuries. That said, by the time the trade deadline comes, Quintana could be back. Carrasco should be back. JV might be pitching different. Max might be pitching different. Peterson and McGill, who knows, what their role will be. Will they be on the team? Will they be in AAA? Will they be a bullpen guy who's getting outs in big situations? We don't know. But again, they need some help. And so it's okay, do you go out and maybe make a move now? We've seen the Rays already make a couple of moves, which is hilarious because they're
them
just
of all teams, right?
Winning game after game after game after game. I think they could do from calling up some of these young guys. I really do. Some of these young guys have been really good in AAA. I mean, we've seen 2 already, but it's been Beatty not out of necessity. Beatty out of, he kind of forced their hand. Alvarez out of necessity. But I think that would have happened anyway, the way that it was going. But they've got some more guys that can hit down there. They're still short on the pitching down there. So maybe there's a pitching move or 2 to be made just on the fringes. It doesn't have to be a big splashy move right now, but something to short up. Maybe it is that Trevor Williams type of a guy who can kind of go back and forth and give him some quality innings. Whatever it is, they need to find something to spark them. And to me, that's something that can happen sooner than later.
I agree with you. And, not only talking on the offensive front, but stay on the pitching front for a second. I'm actually going to look and see what his start to the year has been like, because the first guy that pops in my head that could potentially eat innings and maybe be reliable, maybe have more life on his pitches too, versus a guy who's, not to shame the Yacobonuses and some others of the world, but guys that pretty much have been thrown around the league already and have been having their turns, and there's a reason why they haven't been consistent in the bigs versus a guy who hasn't even been given a shot yet, and that's Grant Hartwig. I'm actually going to look up his numbers right now because he had a solid spring. Hartwig started the year again in single A and skyrocketed, was in every single Mets minor league team last year at a 2.5, 3 ERA, was fantastic, eating innings whenever called upon. And he looked really sharp. So I'm curious what his year is like starting the year in AAA. And here we go. In 10 games, he has a 1.35 ERA and a 1.35 WHIP. So granted, I know it's small sample size, but Hartwig might need to be that next man up to be called up to the bullpen and hopefully be a mainstay. Because while, yes, you can...
It might be interesting to see our guy Dom Hamill maybe
That's a good point. He's off to a very good year, a good start in AA.
There are some guys, some younger guys in the minor leagues for the Mets that have some prospect status and have pitched well maybe they turn to one of those guys in one of these spots where Lucchesi has to go on 3 days rest. I wouldn't be opposed to at least giving these guys a look and saying, okay, what do you got for us? Because what we got right now ain't working. So go see what happens.
Yeah, Dom Smith and Mike Vasile, I would say, are like the two guys to look at most right now. If that was going
Dom
to happen,
Hamill. Yeah, wrong Dom. You went back in the day.
Oh, did I? My apologies, Dom. Dom Hamill.
Dom's awesome too. I love Dom.
They're both great. Yeah, no, I don't have an issue with either of them. But yeah, no, Dom. I'm gonna butcher it. Hamill.
Don't say the first name.
Hamill.
Don't say the first name.
Both of them. Not that we want to see. And again, this is where the frustration comes in, though. You have the people saying $400+ million payroll, and we're rushing the kid all the way from Double-A just to make a start. Yes, that might be a reality, unfortunately, because this is the Mets at the end of the day. Let's be realistic here. I mean, no, you can't.
Do you want to win games, or do you want to keep going where you're going right now?
Yeah,
right? Like that's.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. So we'll see on that front. It would certainly give me vibes of David Pearson being rushed up from Double-A all the way to the bigs in 2020, making his debut against the Red Sox. And DP is a guy who I really, really hope figures himself out, because the stuff is there, but the location has not been. And he didn't have a promising first start that we saw in AAA.
Can I tell you how hard it is for Peterson and McGill to get to the big leagues and have a year like they did in 2022, where McGill, he barely pitched, but when he pitched, he was fantastic, right? Like before he got hurt, he was fantastic. Peterson had a really, really good year. When you get to the big leagues and you feel like you finally had that moment where you established yourself as, I'm a big leaguer, and then the team goes out and makes some moves and gets to training camp and says, spring training, and says, oh, by the way, you'll be our 6th, 7th starter and probably going to AAA. That is so deflating. Like, it's time to take your garbage.
Is that the trash?
That's the garbage. Yeah, garbage.
Bobby G, where were you?
So like, I never had like my only moment or whatever in the big leagues where I felt like I finally was 2016 with the Braves. And I had a really good second half with them. And then like a couple weeks before camp, they called me up and said, hey, we signed Kurt Suzuki. He's going to, be in the big leagues with us. You're probably going to AAA. It was so hard for me to show up to spring training and to give a crap. Like, and it's terrible because you shouldn't have that. It's the exact opposite of what you should do. Like, you should be like, screw this. I'm going to push through it. I was like, dude, I've worked so hard for so long and this is my shot. Okay. Well, that's how these guys feel. And so it's a matter of, I'm not saying that that's hurting them this year. I don't know where their mental state is, but I could see that being a problem for both of them. McGill's coming off an injury. Some of it could just be that, but it's hard. It is really hard to fight through that mental adversity that comes from being that guy who feels like they finally proved it. And then they get, kind of set back, even though they ended up, basically playing prominent roles earlier this year. They just didn't, they may not have had the right mindset coming into the season, which is unfortunate. And I feel for them.
I do too. And again, I feel like we were so spoiled last year. A lot of Mets fans were spoiled last year in general, not only with the team's performance for the vast majority of the season, but the pitching too. I mean, that's why, like, as soon as we lost Williams, that hit me like a truck, because I knew how vital that type of piece was. And it's not, you would think it's easy to replace these guys that are innings eaters, but we've learned fast that isn't necessarily the case, to get a guy that can come out almost on a daily basis and give you solid couple innings of work without a problem. And then McGill, Peterson, same thing. And now that these guys aren't off to necessarily the sharpest start, difference between McGill and Pearson is certainly there, because McGill has still been serviceable. Pearson just simply wasn't in his last couple outings. Let's be realistic. But I hope for DP's case, again, he can kind of get in a groove, because the Mets are probably going to need him for sure down the stretch this season to eat innings either out of the pen or as a starter when called upon. But now let's get into this upcoming series, because it's a vital one for this Mets team. Normally you're thinking, oh, you're going that batter's box in Cincy, it's a piece of cake, but we don't know what to expect right now. So I want to ask you, for this Mets team that currently is going to be rolling out Max Scherzer, 80% at all, then Justin Verlander, then Kodai Senga, How are you feeling about their matchup? Because they are facing, aside from Weaver in game one, who I'm sure they'll make look like Cy Young the same way they did with Gomber and Senzatella, and, who was in Detroit, who am I blanking on? Lorenzen. I mean, the list goes on and on. Then you have Hunter Green, who's the flamethrower, really, really young kid, really, really strong young pitcher. And then you have Lodolo, who I'm a personal fan of, very, very sharp young pitcher
Buck
as well.
is too. Buck said a lot of really good things about him last year. I think he put himself on the map at time, in ways last year. It's just been a really tough go for him to start this year. This is not outside of the A's, maybe the Royals. I'm trying to think. The Rockies were supposed to be a pretty bad team. There really aren't like a lot of pushovers in Major League Baseball right now. You're seeing a lot of these young teams, the Pirates, like come out of nowhere and play really good baseball at times.
Yeah.
This Reds team has played some good baseball. They got some guys who can hit. They got some guys who can hit the ball to the ballpark. They got some guys who can pitch. That bullpen isn't the best. I would say that, their biggest advantage or what they should really be trying to do in this series, get to that bullpen early and often, make these starters work, grind them down. Like that's the stuff that I was taught coming up as an A. Like everybody talks about the A's, oh, walk, walk, walk. It wasn't about walks. It was just about making the other team work and getting your pitch and driving your pitch. Be aggressive to your pitch, and then everything else comes. The walks come, the hits come, the homers come, everything comes. And so to me, it's almost like finding that really basic level mental structure going into the series from an offensive standpoint to try to get at this team, because the best way to get to this Reds team is to get through these starters and into that bullpen as quickly as you can, because that's probably their biggest weakness. And I think that's where hopefully the Mets can take advantage of it. And from a pitching staff, they just have to be better. They have to throw strikes. You can't be third worst in baseball in walks. You definitely can't be third worst in baseball in home runs given up. You definitely can't do those two things together, because you walk guys, you give up homers. It's multi-run homers. You're going to lose games like that. And so they just have to be better. They got to throw strikes. They got to get ahead. They got to put guys away. They got to do it all. I mean, it just hasn't been good, which is surprising, because Jeremy Hefner has shown in his first 2 years, he's a heck of a pitching coach. And this team's going to need him to work some magic and try to get this rotation pitching the right way.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at this series, this is the perfect time and pretty much no excuse time for every one of these starters. You got to get at least 6 innings out of. Finally give some relief to these relievers who rightfully deserve it. I mean, they're throwing out everyone and their mother right now to see innings for this Mets team, because how desperate they've been for consistent pitching. So hoping that's the case with Max, even not fully healthy. I know he just faced Detroit and did do well, but it's still the Reds. You got to eat innings here. Hopefully, if we could see Max somewhat similar to when he returned off the oblique, what was it? Was it July last year against the Reds, and he absolutely carved them up in Cincy. I'm hoping we see a similar type outing. Not getting my hopes up, though. Same thing with JV, who I'm excited to see more of. I felt like I couldn't analyze him properly in game one too much, because I was so gutted by the fact that the Mets were doing nothing offensively behind him. Like it felt like deja vu over and over again, seeing that with the ace. And then Kodai Senga coming off of a strong start. Give me another. Hopefully get the walk rate a little bit down, just a little bit more. I mean, even if he only allows 3 walks, I'll be happy. It's baby steps for this Mets team. But if there's any time to start to get on a groove and hopefully have this lineup break out, and the pitching too, hopefully it starts with tomorrow, because the kids, I like the matchups for Alvarez, Beatty, I do. And the depth of this lineup, has yet to be desired in some sense. We haven't loved what we've seen with Canna. Vogelback, same thing. A lot of people are giving Vogelback grief. He had a home run yesterday, but had a bad play prior to that. But he's one of those guys, too, where, he's second right now on the Mets in OPS, if I'm not mistaken. Like, Vogelback's never going to be that power guy, and I know that's what frustrates fans about him. And yes, in hindsight, maybe the Mets shouldn't have made that trade with Colin Holderman being off to a great start this year for Pittsburgh, which Joe would come in and say, I miss
Yeah,
Colin
I'm really
Holderman.
glad Joe's not on this for that one. That's we don't. Poor guy. He has nightmares about that trade.
And I was a big Holderman fan too. Vogelback just not getting the power production that you want out of the DH, which goes in hand with why it should be shocking if the Mets do another internal move, which leads us to the potential news, not 100% certain on how accurate or how realistic it is. But Mike Rodriguez, who's a Hispanic reporter out there, seen many of them on Twitter too that have been good with their reporting in the offseason especially. But he just came out earlier today and basically hinted at Mauricio potentially being called up in the coming days with the Mets, has had positive discussions with Buck Showalter apparently, has been keeping his luggage on him in case he needs to be called at any point. So I don't know if Mauricio is going to be called up at all during this Red Series or potentially afterward, but that is something to keep an eye on, as Mauricio has been batting basically 300, has 6 home runs, north of 20 RBIs, 16 I think, and has an OPS over 900. Vientos has 10 and 11 home runs this year, has been absolutely killing it. For pure DH production is where Vientos comes into play. I think he could give you more power production out of what you're getting right now with the inconsistencies there. But with pure talent, a guy that can play at second any day right now and do it fine, that is where the appeal of Mauricio comes into play, with, of course, shifting McNeil to left. Because Guillorme, while he's been fine with the glove, I mean, Guillorme and Nido alike have just been gaping holes in this lineup when they're in there that you're feeling less than confident. Unfortunately, to start the year, you could tell that, especially Guillorme last year is that great contact hitter. While he might be able to get out of his funk, I feel like we know what he is, and he's always going to be that defensively minded first player.
Yeah, Ronnie's been my spark, I think, since spring training that I've been talking about. This is going to be the guy who comes up and really does it for this team. I would be really excited to see him get his opportunity right now. Just to kind of see what he could do with this, in this lineup, and to see if he could be that spark. Because, I mean, you think about what's been a 3 or 4-handed monster with him and Vientos, including the 2 guys that are already in the big leagues in Beatty and Alvarez. You think about what we've seen those guys do in the minor leagues over the last couple of years. You have to at least salivate a little bit, thinking, what if all 4 of them were in this big league lineup and they were productive?
Who would have thought that would happen potentially this year too?
I did not think. Yeah, I didn't think that all 3, even 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 4 would be up this early. When we were talking about this in spring training, it was like, okay, I thought Ronnie would get a shot. I thought Beatty would get a shot. I thought Alvarez, it might take a little bit longer. Obviously, that was out of necessity. And Vientos, we just didn't know how it was going to work out, because with the roster, it's going to be tough. But we're talking about it now. And, if Ronnie comes up, that would be really exciting to see what he could do with the other 2 in this lineup. Hopefully get Pete swinging it better. Hopefully get Lindor swinging it better, and get this team moving in the right direction. Nimmo's been awesome. I mean, what more can we say about that guy? He's been phenomenal outside of that steal attempt. We won't go there. But this team, they have the pieces. They're just going to need their pitching to turn it around. But offensively, I really think there's more in the tank, and I think we're going to start to see it hopefully in the next week or so. Hopefully at Great American Ballpark.
Yeah. And talking about Ronnie, just one more, not that I'm a big fan of him, just because he has a signature in my cap right now, which I say feels very funny considering we're the same age, but it is what it is. But Ronnie, he reminds me a lot of how his plate approaches right now. We see the power there, and I can understand maybe the Mets giving him a longer leash than what is rumored right now. Is he's very Ahmad Rosario-esque. He's going to be there with the slugging for sure. He's going to hit gap to gap. He's going to give you power, a lot more home run power than I think what Rosie could give you even at his peak with the Mets. But he's a low OBP guy. He does not get many walks right now. I mean, Mauricio, I can count on my hand. I'm pretty sure the amount of times he's been walked this year. He's locked in. He's swinging for the fences every time. And I actually don't have a problem with that right now, as long as the contact hitters can do what they're supposed to do. This Mets
you need some of that.
Yes, exactly.
You need some of that. Yep. That's okay.
Yeah, this is a contact hitting team, right? So they just set up, be the play setter as we expect them to. Then hopefully Mauricio can be to a lesser extent, obviously, what we see with other sluggers on teams out of bounds, like the Phillies with Schwarber, for example, very similar in that sense, right? So I really hope that the Mets may have found something here, not only him, but Vientos too. It's crazy that we could potentially see all 4 guys up at the same time this year for a Mets team that, when you look at this payroll again and you head into the season with these expectations and you're like, oh my God, they're somehow starting 4 of their top prospects in the same year. That is a role we might be living in. For me, it really doesn't matter as long as they are productive and they help lead this Mets team to victory, because that is the ultimate goal.
Vientos is on pace for a 40-40 season in the minor leagues.
Yeah, and
a 40 double, 40 homer season.
And what's even more impressive about Vientos? If you look at his numbers, every single year in the minors to start his young career, he usually has a bad start to the season, especially in the first month and a
Not
half or
this
two
year.
months.
Yep.
Not this year. He's locked in. He's had that taste of the bigs already,
Yep.
so he wants his ass right back up there as soon as possible. And you got to love that, right? So, maybe they are the keys in the end. Not that the Mets should have to rely on them, but this might be the world that we live in right now. Where
We've seen the Dodgers do it for years.
yeah.
Seen them do it for years. Young guys. They're doing it again this year. James Outman.
Oh my God!
Miguel
You
Vargas.
saw his freaking hit yesterday in extras against Padres. Oh,
kid's a stud, man. It's okay to rely on some young guys. Like, it's okay if they're your spark. That you need that. You need that mix of veterans, young guys, like journeymen. That's how this game goes. And I think they could use a nice injection of youth in that clubhouse, and they're starting to get it.
Yeah, they are starting to get it, and I'm damn excited to see not only more Beatty, but Alvarez. Like I said, he's taking solid at-bats now. He's not looking like that automatic out that has no clue what to do other than press as soon as he gets out there. And, this could be a big series for him. I'm definitely going to be locked on him. And I do see a donation here earlier from Barry. Thank you so much. He says, the clock is ticking on Epler, Wardy, says Barry. Bargain bin shopping, at least from last year's deadline. The offense, no offensive help. This is concerning. Before we get out of here, Rec, what is your personal opinion on Billy Epler? Because for me, he certainly has done things to help this team, but I can understand how Mets fans have yet to feel a certain way about him or have a negativity because, what would he be doing necessarily if he didn't have the type of opportunity he has with Cohen and from the sample size that we saw him with an Artie Moreno owner, which is separate. But just want to know your quick thoughts on him, and then we'll get out of here.
I really like Billy. I've had the chance to talk to him, on both a professional and personal level a little bit. He's just a fantastic person. He's a dad, cares about his kids, cares about his family, cares about this team, wants to make it a winner, wants to do something special in New York. This guy, I think when you inherit a team where this Mets organization was, in the fact that they had nothing in the minor leagues when he took over, and he's gotten them to the point where they're at now with that minor leagues, and they're starting to have some production out of guys coming up. The pitching is still coming. That was still way, way back, in the very, very early stages of guys were getting drafted that were, barely, that are just now kind of prospects, if you will. But this team was in a bad spot, and I think he's done a really nice job of guiding the ship, giving them a chance to compete during the year, even while they're guiding the ship, if you will. And so, to me, I think he's done a great job. I think you could talk about last, trade deadline and how he should have, and how he should have done a little more. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like that he didn't, because now look what we have. Look what's coming out of the cupboard. I think you have to try to balance the equation. I think he's doing a nice job of it. This team hasn't performed to what I think any of us expected this year, including him. And so that, is concerning, I'm sure, for him. But you just go about your business. You do what you do, and you try to put the best product out there while also looking forward to the future. You have to do both. And I think right now, I think he's doing a great job.
I like those thoughts, and I feel fairly similar. I think last year's trade deadline bothered me most just because that felt like a Mets team that was just a piece or two away from really being something special. And now we're already seeing the differences from last year to this year. So I think that's why it bothered me more. I can understand that they were limited and they didn't want to part, but at the same time, if you already had that successful of a team that can make it that much better, who knows what would have happened last year if the Mets would have been the same, or if they really would have taken that next step down the stretch when they really needed to. But that's all I have to say on the Epler front for now. I know we're going to be constantly talking about him throughout the year on if the Mets continue their downward spiral, or if they do well, then he will certainly get some praise depending on what the reasoning is. But I do see some donations. JV, thank you for the dono. He says, I got my Twitter account flagged because of my frustration over this team. I'm not surprised. You're probably at least the 10th Mets fan to actually say something similar to me over the past couple of weeks. Seriously, you guys are crazy. Amish, thank you so much for the dono. He says, would you part ways with Nito when Narvaez is back? That's a good question. And I don't know. I really don't have an answer to that right now.
No,
says Rec. So
who is your solid defensive catcher if you do that?
True.
Like who
That
can
no,
you?
you're right. Nito doesn't have any more minor league
I mean,
options, right?
Alvarez has looked fine back there, but Nito like is your best catcher. You can't do that, and you're not going to get a lot of offensive production out of Narvaez. Like people thought when this kid came over, it's like, oh, we're getting rid of James McCann, we got Narvaez, yay! Like he's not a great offensive catcher, so you're not really getting much out of him. He's a little bit better defensively, not great. To me, no, absolutely not. If anything, I would be parting ways with Narvaez, but you can't because of the money. So, well, maybe you can. It's Cohen. Who knows? But yeah, I would not be parting ways with Tomas Nido anytime soon. The staff may need him, especially with the way they're pitching right now. They may need him desperately.
Fair. All right. Well, again, I appreciate the breakdown, Rick, and I appreciate everyone that chimed in for our latest episode of Queen's Corner. Make sure to stay tuned. We'll probably be back here after the Red Series, hopefully after a series victory for the first time since the Mets were in LA. Yeah, that's how long it's been. I know it's driving me crazy too, guys. But of course, if you enjoyed watching this live or on replay, either on the WardyNYM YouTube channel, on the 7 Line socials, on their Twitter or Facebook, thank you so much. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button wherever you're watching us. Make sure to check out Rec, not only on MLB Network throughout the week, but also, of course, on his Twitter and Instagram. Check out me on Twitter and my YouTube channel per usual. Stay tuned for more great content as always, guys. And no matter what, let's go Mets. Talk to you guys again.